Good morning, Ohio State fans, and welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Tuesday, August 26th. I am joined by our film study guru expert, longtime employee of the site, Kyle Jones, better known as Jonesy. How you doing today, Jones?
Excited. It's game week.
Yeah.
This is like it's like the advent calendar's counting down, right? Like you can taste Christmas mornings coming close. Like you haven't gotten your presents yet, but you can see them under the tree. You're starting to like make out in your mind what's coming. So yeah, it's exciting. This is like one of the best weeks of the year.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you've got this kind of game on deck and not something like, Akron, where the game's going to be lined by 30 points. We've got compelling football. And, I get in a certain sense, it's good that as we're trying to, count down the days and the time, we don't have to wait a whole extra Saturday. It's it's the one good thing about Big Noon Kickoff, I guess, is we're getting it right when the Saturday slate starts, right at the end of our work week. So we have that to look forward to with Big Noon Kickoff. Might get into some funny stuff with, Fox and anybody that's subscribed to YouTube TV, but that'll be a topic for another show sometime. Hopefully we're at least getting our football Saturday. So we're very grateful to have Jones on the Dubcast here this season, and any other time he wants to come hang out, but particularly in the season because Jones is obviously one of the big personalities on the 11 Warriors YouTube channel for the film studies he does. During the season, we are going to be having Jones on Tuesday mornings to kind of tease what his topics will be for the film study that posts a couple days later on Thursday morning on the YouTube channel. Obviously, we haven't had a game yet, so we don't necessarily have a topic to tease for this week, even though Jones is going to have something for you guys before the Texas game this coming Thursday. However, he did already post one off-season of sorts film study last week focusing on Caleb Downs. In tandem with that, there was an interesting conversation that came up among the 11 Warriors staff this week relative to Caleb Downs versus Jeremiah Smith as to who is Ohio State's best player. Now, I was someone last season who I approached the hype around Jeremiah Smith with very guarded skepticism. I thought a lot of the expectations that were being anointed on him, and I'm sure you can probably understand this as a Cleveland sports fan, it reminded me a lot of LeBron James, right? Like everybody expected this guy could go to the league or the next level right now and be the best player at his position. It's like, okay, I would like to see it, but I would also like to see it. I want to see it first before I actually buy into that. Obviously, it's incredible what he's done. At the same time, I don't feel like Downs had those expectations going to Alabama. Obviously, there were big expectations on him when he was the number one player in the portal coming over to Ohio State, and he has been a transformative player for this defense for the Buckeyes. Jones is kind of the opinion that Downs is the best player on Ohio State's team, even over that of Jeremiah Smith. So I want to give you your chance here to make that case, Jones. And I know there's probably going to be a lot of people shouting you down in the comments, but you know what? The floor is yours. I would love to hear the case for Caleb Downs over Jeremiah Smith. Please enlighten us.
Yeah, I thank you. I appreciate finally having my time to stand on the soapbox and make this case. This to be clear, before I go any further, is not in any way, shape, or form a dismissal or denigration of what Jeremiah Smith can do. I think this is truly a 1A, 1B, and we're splitting hairs, and this is the biggest champagne problem to ever have. I want to just, before I get labeled as a Smith hater, because there are some, even in amongst our colleagues, who have labeled me as such, and I want to just shed that label right now. Yes,
I get where you're coming from.
Right. No, what I think is Caleb just unlocks so much for this team. And best is it's a subjective term in the sense of how you define it can mean very many things. Is he the most physically gifted player on the team? No, that's Jeremiah Smith. Like, I'm not going to deny that. And Jeremiah Smith has by far the highest ceiling of any player on this team. I think what we're going to see from this guy 4 or 5 years down the road when he's in the NFL is going to be incredible. And I'm not going to sit here and say like 5 years from now, he'll be a better pro, or Caleb Downs will be a better pro than Jeremiah Smith. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is right now, today, who is the best player that contributes the most to Ohio State's football team? And I would say that is Caleb Downs for what he is capable of doing and what he will do, I believe, this season. Now, what do I mean by that? The defensive transformation that we all talked about, we all saw the second half of last year, where Ohio State turned from this kind of, hey, they've got talent, but they're still, it looks a lot like it has the last couple of years. There's still some blown coverages. Oh, the Oregon game, first one, what's happening here? It's more of the same. And then it turned into this monster. I mean, that was an incredible defense. The best one that I've seen since I've been covering this team. And there was 11 seasons that I've been covering this team, seen a lot of good defenses. That defense, that unit through the CFP was better than any Ohio State unit I've seen. And the big reason for that was they built it around number two. And you had NFL freaks at every level. They will continue to have NFL freaks. Maybe not as polished as they did last season, but they will continue to have NFL talent. And yet the system revolves around number two. And that is why I believe he is going to be, or he is the best player on this team this year. And again, I know it's not the most valuable, and everybody has that. Who's the MVP? Is it the most valuable? Is it the best? And I think it's no question that the most valuable player on Ohio State's roster this season is Caleb Downs. I think that with the talent in that receiver room, I don't want to see it certainly, but with the talent in that receiver room, if Jeremiah Smith has to miss a game or two, or he's out, if he gets dinged up, right? We've seen it with Ohio State receivers. We've seen Jackson Smith and Jigba. We've seen Emeka Ibuka miss time 2 years ago, right? Guys will get dinged up at the receiver position. If you're not physically capable, you can't make the same impact. But there are other guys that can step up, right? There's other 5-stars just waiting for the opportunity to see the field. They might not be what Jeremiah is, certainly, but there's talent there. In my opinion, though we don't know exactly what Matt Patricia's system and how he's going to call the defense this year looks like, if number 2 is on the sideline, Ohio State's in trouble. That simple, right? And that's, to me, why I look at this team. Like, who's the best player on the team? Who's the one they're going to rally around? It's number 2 on defense.
No, I completely understand where you're coming from, and I frankly agree with it a little bit. Now, this is going to be the nicest thing anybody's ever said about a Michigan player on the 11 Dubcast, but last season, Jake Butt, right before the national championship, did a little bit of his own mini film study where he profiled one play in particular that was from the Cotton Bowl, which you're going to talk about on Thursday, where he demonstrated the kind of stress that Caleb Downs puts on opposing play callers and offenses relative to when you're pre-snap trying to evaluate how many defenders are in the box. You're typically looking at 5, 6, 7, 8. They kind of line Downs up on the back edge of it to where it's like, okay, I don't know if we should really be accounting for him or not. Like, is he really going to be able to crash the line of scrimmage if we run the ball between the tackles? Is he going to be able to drop back deep enough if we try to beat them over the top? And that kind of will they or won't they that the offense is playing with, and Downs' just incredible ability to cover all bases. It is much harder to replicate that than it is what Jeremiah Smith brings relative to the other talent Ohio State has in that room that you spoke about. So I think you make a very interesting case that I haven't heard a lot of other people make, and I think it's very fair and very valid. And it'll be interesting to see how much they need to lean on one guy versus the other as the season progresses. Now, one other interesting question that kind of came up in among our staff last week was the dynamic between James Peoples and C.J. Donaldson. When we first rebranded the Dubcast, I had Dan Hope on to talk about I believe it was his penultimate depth chart projection, and I asked him about if he thought we were going to see a similar timeshare to what we got with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson last year between Peoples and Donaldson. And he said, yeah, he does expect that just because it's less tread off the tires for both guys. And, it's what they did last year, and it worked out pretty well for the team. I'm pretty high on Peoples this year. I think a lot of other people are too. I like Donaldson too. But you made an interesting, you said this might be kind of a hot take, but you think that Donaldson, at least, towards the end of the season, is probably going to emerge as the clear-cut go-to guy for this team. So I'm curious, is that belief for you founded in just being very high on Donaldson, having reservations about Peoples, or a little bit of both? I'm just wondering what your thought process with that belief is.
Well, I think it comes to, it's not a discredit to Peoples in any means. It's talking about a guy who's played a lot. This is a guy who started for 2 years, played a lot of football, rushed for over 2,000 yards at West Virginia. He is a physical presence. We know what that means in November, especially when you don't have a Will Howard back there to run quarterback power on 4th and 1. You need a big body who can fall forward, right? Julian Saint's probably not going to be put in that
Well, they're
position.
going to rotate
And
Keenholz in to do that, right?
right. Sure. Of course they will. 4th and 1 from the 35. I was watching the Cotton Bowl. Everybody remembers the play where Will tripped on the turf monster. What people
Yeah.
don't remember is that was 4th and 1, and it was quarterback power. It
Mhm.
was take the snap and fall forward, big fella. That play is not going to be in the playbook
Yeah.
this year. It wasn't in the playbook 2 years ago with Kyle McCord, right? That was a big reason why they went and got Will Howard. But here we are 2 years later in a similar situation where you need a guy that can fall forward. And that's why they went out and got Quinshon Judkins to go be that guy. And while Travion had an incredible playoff run, truly he did, like not just the screen pass, but like he was fantastic throughout. It was partly because he was fresh. He wasn't dinged up, but it was also because in November they had that big body Judkins who was getting a lot of the carries, right? You would look out on who's getting the first series carries in November, those cold weather games. It was Quinshon Judkins. And I think that 230-pound 6'2" horse next to Julian Sayin or behind Julian Sayin is going to be very valuable for that time of year. And the other piece to it, and this is part of those veteran running back things that you hear all the time. This is a guy, again, who's played a lot of football. Now, it's not in the same system, certainly, and I'm not going to come out here and say like he's the same kind of pass blocker that Travion was. But Travion's pass blocking was such an underrated part of the offensive growth through the last part of the season last year, right? And they're going to need a guy like that to be in the backfield, to pick up blitzes, to be there next to Sayin, to understand, hey, they're mixing up pressures. That's what Ohio State's seeing a ton of. I'm going to show in the film study this week, Texas ran a ton of disguised pressures. That's what the game has become. That's what Michigan has done a ton of over the years, is they show you one look pre-snap and then bring us another look post-snap. You need a guy who's smart and willing and capable enough to diagnose and then pick up that blitz. That might be a defensive end coming right at that my quarterback. I've got to be able to stand up and get in his way. Peoples may not be ready for that duty yet, candidly. And so that's where I think the other piece of it. But again, I'm dancing around the subject. He's a good running back. Like that's all part of it. Like, go watch his highlights at West Virginia. This is not a schlub. This is not a second stringer that you look at and go, yeah, it's nice. Maybe on short yardage he can fall forward. I'm throwing it back here. This is not Rod Smith as the backup fullback, right? Jumping in. This is a dude who deserves to carry the pill. And that's why I think, like, again, I think it will be a rotation. I think Dan's right. But I think when we get towards, those big games late in the season, like, I'm looking at Ann Arbor, candidly. I think they're probably they're going to give them both carries. But on 3rd and 2 in Ann Arbor, I would bet C.J. Donaldson's getting the handoff. And that's what I meant by that comment.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'd see where you're coming from that. I think there's a good amount of foresight baked into that observation. And, I wonder how much you'll talk about this in the film study that's coming up, but those running backs, their pass protection is going to get tested right away in this opener by that Texas front. They're great along the defensive line. A lot of people would say they've got the best unit in that sense in college football this year. And they're going to have to come correct and protect Sayin, or if they're going to be able to get the ball off to guys like Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith and win that game. So it'll be interesting to see how well they do with that early test, and then how that maybe plays into the rotation and the playing time of those guys as we get further into the season. But we will see when the day comes. We've only got a handful of days here left. We'll be counting down the days, and thankfully, your film study is going to help us get through Thursday at least. So we have that to look forward to in a couple days. Until then, thank you very much for tuning into the 11 Dubcast. We will be back tomorrow morning, and we will be back with Jones next Tuesday to talk about what he's going to talk about coming out of the Texas game. So, Jones, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you much more this season. So, thank you. Take care, folks.